Number 34, a marathon runner runs 10.5 miles in 2 hours. What is her rate? And so what are we talking about when we're talking about rate? We're talking about miles per hour, right? And so I don't really even have to do any math. I can kind of just intuitively know if it's this far in 2 hours, then it's half of it for 1 hour, right? So before I even do any work, I know that the answer is 5.25 or 5 1/4, because half of 10 is 5 and half of a half is a fourth. And this says expression, but what I really want you to focus on these is proportions, because we're coming off of our proportion unit. So write a proportion all this week. When it says an expression, I want you to write a proportion. Write an expression to represent the problem. So 10.5 miles in 2 hours is how many miles in 1 hour? And so one of the things that I've noticed is people are having a hard time figuring out if we're using the unit rate 1 over here or if we're using 100. I see a lot of people put a 100 over here. Can anybody tell us how they know when to use a 1 and when to use a 100? Mackenzie? Yes, when we're looking for a percent or when there's a percent in the problem, that's the percent proportion. Here, if we're looking for a rate, we're looking for a unit rate, and that's always going to be a 1 hour, a 1 mile, a 1 gallon. So we're always going to use the 1. So really think about what the question's asking you. So you could do like I did. How do you get from 2 to 1? Well, you divide by 2, so you divide that by 2. If you don't see that, then you cross multiply. 1 times 10.5 is 10.5. So 2 times something has to be 10.5 if they are proportional. And so 10.5 divided by 2. If you can't do that, lots of people like to turn those into decimals. I encourage you to try these problems with fractions while it's practice. So 10, fraction button 1, fraction button 2. 10.5 divided by 2 is 5 1/4. So it says solve the problem, but we really did that up here, didn't we? And so what would the words be? What is her rate? Her rate is 5 1/4 miles per hour. If you did turn that to 10.5, let's see, if we did turn it to 10.5, 10.5 divided by 2, and you get a decimal. If it's a fraction problem, you need to report your answer as a fraction. How can I turn this decimal into a fraction? Yes? It'd be 1/4. But if I didn't know that, anybody know how on the calculator, if I don't know that that's 1/4? What do you think Cam did? Second button and PRB, because right above it, it has the F to D, fraction to decimal. See, it says it's going to take your the answer and change the form from fraction to decimal or decimal to fraction. And you hit enter and you get 5 1/4. So fraction problems need fraction answers. Decimal problems need decimal answers. So make sure that you know how to use that second fraction to decimal button, the PRB button. Questions on that first one? All right. At East Middle School, 28% of the students are in the band. If 168 students are in the band, how many students go to East Middle School? All right, so this is one of those percent proportions. We know because it's 28% of the students are in the band. So 28 are in the band, 28% out of 100. So this is going to be band, and this is going to be total. Because the total percent is 100%, 28% are in the band. So this is going to be band, and this is going to be total, if this is total percent. So if 168 students are in the band, Where is that 168 going to go? The numerator or denominator? Numerator, right? Band. 168. And so now cross multiply 100 times 168. $18,600. No, 16,800. 16,800. I don't know what multiplies by 28 to get that. So what do? Divide by 28. So it's in the calculator already. Divide by 28. And your answer is 600. You'll know you did it right if the total number of students is higher than the 168 in the band. If you set it up incorrectly, your answer would not have made sense. So, how many students go to East Middle School? What am I going to say? 600 students go to East Middle School. I'm just going to abbreviate. All right. Those two weren't too difficult, right? Pretty easy this week. Okay. All right. Let's put those to the side. And let's look at our work for today on complementary and supplementary angles. So let's just do a quick review. Last week we talked about vertical and adjacent angles, right? Those are words that we need to know the definition of. So if I'm looking at these four angles here that are made from intersecting lines, someone tell me a pair of adjacent angles. Adjacent angles. Just see what you remember. Yes. 2 and 3 are adjacent. Why are they adjacent? Raise your hand if you can tell me why 2 and 3 are adjacent. They're right beside each other. They're next door neighbors. They share a common side and they share a vertex. Are they congruent? Who knows what congruent means? Camden? Same shape and size. Are 2 and 3 congruent? They don't really look congruent. They're pretty close. There is no evidence that they are congruent, right? They don't have the same measurement that we can see. So adjacent angles do not have to be congruent, right? They could be, but they don't have to be. Okay? Normally, they would be congruent if you see that it makes 4 right angles. Then if you had something that looked like this, straight up and down, then you would say 2 and 3 would be congruent because all 4 of those would be 90-degree angles. Right? Then they wouldn't necessarily be. Okay, but let's go back to this one. Someone tell me a pair of vertical angles. Yes. 2 and 4 vertical angles are across from each other. Are they congruent? Yes. Vertical angles are always congruent. We don't have to have any measurement, any other information. If they are directly across from each other, they are congruent. If these two are directly across from each other, 1 and 3 are also vertical angles, they are congruent. Okay? That's an understanding. You should be comfortable with all of those things that we just talked about. If you're not, do some studying. Okay. All right. Now we're talking about complementary and supplementary angles. Let's just talk about what those two things mean. Complementary. Anybody remember what complementary means? Or you've got your notes so that you remember? I don't want you working on this worksheet yet because I want to show you how you're supposed to do the math. All right. Noelle. Add up to 90 degrees. Complementary angles add up to 90 degrees. And supplementary angles, what do supplementary angles add up to? Autumn? (180 degrees). 180 degrees is also known as what kind of angle? Straight angle. It's a straight angle. So you have a straight line as a basis. So a straight line that's split. All right, so let's just look up here at the top. Identify each pair of angles as complementary, supplementary, or neither. Anybody tell me about number 1? Autumn. Supplementary. My clue is that there's a straight line. If I don't pay attention to this ray, there's a straight line right there that's 180 degrees, and we're splitting it with a ray, and we're making 2 angles. All right. Someone tell me about 5. Yes. Supplementary. Can I prove that they are supplementary? Add. Let's add. 126 plus 54. 180 degrees. In math, you've got to have some proof. Here my proof is I see they make a straight line. Here it looks like if I just move them close together, they're going to be a straight line, but you really need to do the proof to do the math. All right. What about number 8? Yes. They look like neither to me. 49, 49. 8, 98 degrees, neither. All right, everybody okay with that? Okay. So you get what to do on the top, correct? Okay, the bottom, algebra. There's your clue right there. You got to do some algebra, some 1- and 2-step equations to do some math here. Find the value of x in each figure. This is just asking you to find the value of x in each figure. So let's look at number 10. So there's part of this that I don't really have to pay attention to. First, I've got to decide, are these complementary or supplementary? So if I take this little piece of paper and I cover this ray up, tell me about those 2 angles. Complementary or supplementary? Supplementary, right? We have this straight line here, and we have split it with this ray right here. So we have 2 angles that we know add up to, what? 180 degrees. So the math is going to look like 3x plus 18, because we're adding them up, and that has to equal 180 degrees. This is the algebra that we're doing for number 10. Okay? This is a 2-step equation. Do we remember how to do a 2-step equation? So we're trying to find out what x is. So we save this for last, right? What are we going to do first? Subtract 18 from both sides. It needs to look like this. If you're not writing this down right now, you are not doing your job. You are left with 3x, positive 18 and negative 18 are a 0 pair, equals 180 minus 18. Is that 162? 180 minus 18 is 162. Now what? Yes. Divide both sides by 3 because this is multiply by 3. And the inverse is to divide by 3. So x equals, and I still have 162 in my calculator, divided by 3. And you get 54. So the answer is x equals 54. Now, there may be some questions that ask you then, if you know what x equals, what's the measure of this angle? Is the measure of that angle 54? No, what is the measure of this angle? 3 times x, and 3 times x, right? It's 3x. So that means 3 times 54. And what is 3 times 54? So this one is 162 degrees. And if we add 162 and 18, what do we have to get? 180. Okay, so I want you to not only tell me what x equals, I also want you to tell me, I want you to write in the measure of that angle. I want you to do the math. So find out what x is, and then use substitution. If x is 54 and this angle is 3 times x, then I want you to do the 3 times 54. Questions? Let's look at number 12. So this was number 10. Number 12. All right, are those complementary or supplementary angles? That's your first decision. What are they? Complementary, I can tell because they have to add up to 90, because if I ignore this ray in the middle, this right here is a 90-degree angle, this little square here. So that means those two angles add up to 90 degrees. So 4x plus 42. 4x plus 42 has to equal 90 degrees. We just know that just because that is complementary. And the definition is complementary angles add up to 90 degrees. Okay. Now, two-step equation, what's the first thing I'm going to do? Subtract 42 from both sides, because the opposite of adding 42 is subtracting 42. You are left with 4x, that's a zero pair, equals 90 minus 42, 48. And so now I'm left with a one-step equation. 4 times x is 48. So what do I do now? Divide both sides by 4. And you are left with your x equals 12. So I'm assuming you all have this written down somewhere. I'm not sure I should, at this point in the year, I should have to invite you to join me on the mathematical journey that is algebra. It's super fun. Okay, all right, so x equals 12. Now, we know this one's 42. Let's figure out what this one is. 4 times x, 4 times x. So 4 times 12 equals 48. This measurement is 48 degrees. Do you notice that you see that back in there? Right there, that 48 that we got? So it's there. If I were to add 48 plus 42, what do they have to add up to? 90 degrees if I've done my math right. Right? So there's lots of different ways to prove that your answer is correct here. So you are working on all of these today. Trying front and back. I want to try one more. Can we try 16 before you try to work on your own? Yes, y'all want to work on 16? Y'all sound super excited about this math. I'm so excited about it. Okay, what's the first thing we have to do? We have to decide if they are complementary or supplementary. And these two angles are what? Which one? Supplementary. How can I tell? They make a straight line. The measurement of a straight line is 180 degrees. All right. So this one's a little bit different. Why is this one a little bit different? It has parentheses. Ooh, okay. What else? It's subtraction up here, right? Up here, we just had multiply. Multiply up here is addition. This one's subtraction. But it's still this angle plus this angle equals 180 degrees. So, let's see if I can. There we go. All right, 16. So, x minus 5 plus 22. You're still adding them together because that's the rule. Adding two angles together, they have to equal 180 degrees. Now, I feel a little concerned about the parentheses. Is there anything I need to do? So, is there anything I can do inside the parentheses? Can I subtract 5 from x?
Madison Williams, please come to the front office. Madison Williams, please come to the front office to load the bus if you are in the building.
Okay, so there's no math I can do inside. Is there any distributing or anything I need to do? No, so can I just get rid of the parentheses? Yes. X minus 5 plus 22 equals 180. All right, so do I just start moving things, or do I have some combined like terms I need to do here? Negative 5 plus 22. Anybody know that answer? 17, right? When the signs are different, you subtract. 22 minus 5 is 17. 22 has the greater absolute value and it's positive. If I wasn't sure, could I use my calculator? Yes, you remember how to do that? Negative 5 plus 22 equals 17. So then I am left with x plus 17 equals 180. Now what? Subtract 17 from both sides. And you are left with x equals 163. Is that correct? X equals 163. So what would the measure of this angle be? Yes. 158. I have to use substitution. X minus 5 and x is 163. So 163 minus 5 equals 158. That makes the measure of this 158 degrees. And then I can double check 158 plus 22, 0, 180 degrees. Oh, that one was super fun. Wasn't that fun? Yes. All right, so the steps are, first look at it, decide if they're going to add up to 180 or if they're going to add up to 90, and then just set up your equation and do your math. Okay. Let's talk about number 17. I've had people in previous years have trouble with what the measure of the second angle is. So we know this is 2 times x, so we don't know what x is. What's the measure of this angle over here? 90. Now I can do 2 times x plus 90 equals what? 2 times x plus 90 equals, what do they have to add up to? 180, because they make a straight line. That's that one. Okay. As you glance at that, are there any others you have a question about? No? Okay. All right, so you're working on this. Go back up to the top, and all you're doing up here is complementary, supplementary, or neither. Down here, you're setting up your equation. You're solving for x, and then you're going back and you're figuring out what the measure of that angle is. Questions? If you get done with that and get it checked, you can move on to the word problems on the back. They are not very difficult. They seem pretty wordy, but they're not very difficult. Okay, come see me if you have a question or need some help.